Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the new Aerosmith called 1971 The Road Starts Here, spelled H-E-A-R. It's a little different. This release has a very interesting history to it. It actually got a first release as part of Record Store Day on November 26th of 2021. Here we are on April 8th of 2022 and it is now getting a much wider release. Don't know if it's getting a full worldwide release, but it is getting a much wider release. So the Record Store Day actually was vinyl and cassette only, very limited. And finally we have a CD edition of it. Not only is it a CD, but it's in a jewel case. So I'm super excited about that. I think a lot of you guys will be as well. And so this is a rehearsal tape of the earliest known recordings that Aerosmith did back in 1971. We're going to cover it and break it all down in just a bit. But before we do, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all things that are going on in the world of music, just like this, with a review for the brand new Aerosmith release called The Road Starts Here. And so, band's got a pretty interesting history, and with this release, it's sort of updating, at least the way I feel about it. The band formed in 1970, and their debut album wasn't released until 1973. And so this one here, by releasing this archival release called 1971, The Road Starts Here, it's actually sort of backing up what I consider to be the history of the band. And for me at least, I always think of bands based on their debut album. They may have been together 5 or 10 years before that, who knows? But for me, I always look at when was the first time the public, the general public, knew of the band, sort of a thing. And Aerosmith's release coming out in 1973, but now this backs things up for me until 1971. So instead of thinking about the band, having been around 49 years because the debut came out in 73, I now think of it as 1971 and 51 years. And I know that's a little different. Everybody's got their own way of thinking about things. But I find it interesting when bands release archival material that is earlier than their first known recordings, like the debut album and so forth. And so that's what we have here. We've got some of the earliest known recordings from the band, and surprisingly, they're in really good condition here. It is not a live show because there's no background audience to it, and it's not quite a session either. And the reason we don't exactly know this is the band says they cannot remember where this recording took place or when it exactly took place. They just know it was 1971, and it kind of shocked everyone. It had disappeared, into musical history, so to speak, and then it miraculously reappeared. So it's now getting a release here, which is very, very cool. I love it when stuff like that happens, and especially with something like this that has such good quality to it. So it's 38 minutes long, features 8 tracks on it. Now, first track is actually just an intro. It's a 2-minute track with background talking and some guitar noodling and stuff of that, sort of warming you up. And then it's got 7 songs on it. Somebody, Reeferhead Woman, which is a Jazz Gillum cover, but it didn't actually appear until later, until Night in the Ruts, 1979. So to get a 1971 recording of it is pretty cool, and that's one of the first things that makes this interesting. We then get Walking the Dog, Moving Out, then we get the second thing that makes this really interesting, Major Barbara, the studio outtake that would later appear on Classics Live, which was released in 1986. So a 1971 recording of something that we didn't first hear until 1986 is kind of cool. Don't recall when that outtake was originally recorded, but this one here is an earlier known version of it. And then of course we get Dream On and Mama Ken to round out this album, making for a really great track listing of early stuff plus some bonus stuff in there that didn't make it to that album and time period. And so since this is an early recording and before the debut, Steven is still not quite singing in the style that we would all come to know him from on later releases, that trademark style that he sings in. This is that same style that is on the debut, and a lot of people have commented about that over the years and maybe not liking the debut as much due to that reason. But the thing is, this release here, the 1971 Road Starts Here release, has actually given me quite a new appreciation for that debut album. I was one of those ones that didn't particularly care for it as much due to Steven's vocals, because I came into the band much later. I came into them in the late 80s, early 90s kind of a thing. But I have to say, these recordings here, I think I actually like a little bit more than that debut, but if nothing else, certainly giving me a new appreciation for them. And the quality of this recording is really good for being 51 years old, not professionally recorded, at least as far as we know. There's no tape hiss, there's no pops on it. The two tracks that didn't make the debut on it that appear later on that we were talking about, those are very interesting. They're much more straight ahead blues sounding than the versions that would appear later. So not only are you getting earlier recordings, but you're getting different sounding ones as well. And so it really kind of shows where Aerosmith's roots were at the time. I mean, we know they were within the blues and so forth, but you're really kind of getting to hear it now on this. And while the later versions of those two songs were still quite bluesy, they had a very different production value on it, you know, that studio wizardry and layering of instrumentation and things of that nature, and that is not here. This is just a straight recording of the guys. And before we go any further, if you didn't know, Aerosmith is the same bunch of guys that have always been there since 1970. So all five of the guys that are there today were still back then. This is not earlier guys or different guys. We still get Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, Joey Kramer, Brad Whitford, and Tom Hamilton. Had to quickly check the names on the back of this just to confirm. But the rest of the songs that are on here are very close to what they eventually became, but there's still some subtle nuances in them that make it interesting. If you're a diehard fan like me and you really know those songs, you're going to hear those subtle differences that are in it, and it makes it interesting as a different version from those final recordings. And so for me at least, this thing here has been a very fun and exciting listen to hear. But let's take a look at it. So as I mentioned, it's a jewel case, and that's kind of cool. These days, not a lot of things come in jewel cases, but there we go. Very cool, you know, original early on style art. And then we get the back of it there with the track listing and the band name and everything, and there's the spine of it. So we'll open it up here. Let me spin this around. There we go. That's the inside of it, booklet side with the disc. And I'll pop out the disc just so we can see what's going on behind it. Got some recording style information, and this comes with a really nice booklet too. I kind of wasn't expecting a whole lot with it. So we open it up and it goes through, and right off the bat it says they cannot remember or know when this was recorded, where it was recorded. They just know it was in 1971. But anyways, look at the great write-up that's in here done by David Frick from Rolling Stone. So you know this thing is done well, but just lots and lots of cool stuff to read. Some old archival shots. Look at that one there. Move my finger out of the way. Very cool early on style stuff. Finishing up here, I think we got one more page within it. There you go, another shot of the guys, and then the end of it, and so forth, the back cover that we saw. You know, so following this thing up, and you know, in conclusion, so to speak, while this is not an essential recording as far as I'm concerned, and you know, everybody doesn't need it, I'm not going to go saying something like that, I do think that the interest lies within the history of this sort of thing. And if you're a fan of the history of the band and so forth, there's plenty to sink your teeth into as far as this is concerned. It's a very enjoyable listen. As I mentioned, this thing sounds really good. It's good quality. It is not a dodgy bootleg style type thing. This thing deserved to see the light of day, and I'm really glad they did it. And there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this run through of Aerosmith 1971. The road starts here. They're, well, kind of first and only sort of archival release at this point. I mean, they've done some live stuff here and there over the years, but this thing here, you know, hopefully is going to kick off a really great thing, an archival release that they'll kind of open their the floodgates, so to speak, and the label will release a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll have to wait and see. Maybe we'll get some deluxe editions and box sets going for it. All right, but anyway, again, hope you enjoyed this. Take care. Have a good one, everyone, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye.